So anyways, obviously we're coming up to Yom Kippur now, and there's a lot to talk about, but we have very little time. So I just wanted to kind of give something in mind for you guys to think about a little bit as we enter into Yom Kippur. If you ask me, one of the oddest things that we do on Yom Kippur, or right before Yom Kippur really, is how we start off on Yom Kippur. Starting off on Yom Kippur, obviously we all know very famously, Chazadim around the world are famous for their pieces about this, is the concept of Kol Nidre. Right, we obviously come before HaKadosh Baruch Hu right before Yom Kippur starts, literally, right before we have to try to do it before Shkia. And we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right, to be made for our Nedarim again. We do it publicly for the entire populace of people. And the obvious, real question really is that, most of us, right before Rosh Hashanah, and Erev Rosh Hashanah obviously had the concept in the minhag to do Ataras Nedarim already. And therefore, you would assume that at the end of the Ataras Nedarim, we definitely made a proclamation and we announced that any neder that we're going to make from here on in is going to be null and void. And I would assume that over the past, 10 days, really less, most of us have not done nedarim or made vows. And even if we did, they should have been encompassed in that negation of the vows. So why are we making such a public, if Chazal wanted us to do Ataras Nedarim one more time just in case, so let's do it the same way that we did it on Erev Rosh Hashanah. Right? Why would we have to do a much more public, much more grandiose sense? We obviously start off with a much more like the Yeshiva Shalmalo, the Yeshiva Shalmata. Right? Why do we need this conglomeration, this joining of the the heavenly Yeshiva and also the Yeshiva down here in order to obviously do this Ataras Nedarim? Why can't we just get three guys the same way we did on Erev Rosh Hashanah and do it again? And the answer is because perhaps we're actually trying to be matir a different neder than we think that we're being matir. One of the reasons why, right? There's a phenomenal last mission in Mesachtes Tanas actually tells us that there were no greater days of Yom Tov than Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av. Right? Tu B'Av and Yom Kippur are the two greatest days of Yom Tov in Klal Yisrael. And the Gemara then actually brings that obviously we understand why Yom Kippur is one of the greatest days of Yom Tov in Klal Yisrael. Why? Because obviously the Slicha Mechila, and it brings a pasuk as a raya. It brings the pasuk saying that referring to Yom Kippur as right. Yom Chas and also Yom Simchas Libo. It's the day of the Chas, it's the day of the Simcha b'Kadosh Baruch Hu, which is a reference to the fact that we know that Yom Kippur was the day when Kabbalah Satorah happened. Right? Which Kabbalah Satorah? Obviously the Kabbalah Satorah of the Luchas Shniyas. Seemingly implying that the link of the Simcha that we have on Yom Kippur is somehow linked to Matan Torah in some way. And the question is how. There's another phenomenal Gemara in Daf Ayin Gimel and Aleph in Baba Basra that talks about that, those Gemaras over there, the Rabbi Barakana Gemaras, they're talking about some of the most interesting Agadata Gemaras in all of Shas. And basically, the Gemara goes on to talk about the travels of this one Amora by the name of Rabbi Barakana. He's traveling through the desert and he has an Arab guide. And this Arab guide is taking him from station to station, showing him all sorts of phenomenal things. Rabbi Barakana comes to Har Sinai. When he comes to Har Sinai is actually guarded. Right? Rabbi Barakana is blocked from Har Sinai by these scorpions, these phenomenally large scorpions. And the Gemara then goes on to say that Rabbi Barakana hears this phenomenal baskol. He hears a heavenly voice say out, Oili shenishbati umi meferli. Right? The baskol screams out and cries out, right? Woe to me that I made a shvuah, and I can't negate it. And when Rabbi Barakana hears this, he does nothing. He does nothing. Rabbi Barakana then goes back to the Chacham and he tells the Chacham about his experience there, right? And Rabbi Barakana is then told by the Chacham that you're an idiot, you're a moron. Why didn't you say that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu let out that paschal and said, Oili shenishbati umi meifli, you should have said, Ani meifir. I would have been made for that neder. And the obvious question is, first of all, where in the world, normally we have Ataras Nedarim, we get 3 people in order to be made for Nedarim, right? So maybe if Rabbi Barakana had another 2 people with him, maybe he could have sat down in a bezin and made for HaKadosh Baruch Hu's neder. But where do we ever see that Rabbi Barakana by himself could have been mat and there are bonus homes neder? Where would he have ever thought to do so? The concept of Yom Kippur is something very, very interesting and something very deep. We know that Yom Kippur is the day of Slicha and Mechila to all of Klal Yisrael. And we kind of look at it as, unfortunately, in a childish way of like, us wiping away our Averas, right? We come out, we wipe our Averas away. We need nothing to do with them, right? And it seems like that also. If you look at actually the Gemara Numa, when it talks about, right, how the Avod in the Beis HaMikdash happened, if you read through it in the Tefillah, What's the avoda? Is the Kohen Gadol comes, he comes to the Seir HaMishtaleach, he places all the avodas of Klal Yisrael on the Seir HaMishtaleach. I mean, it seems like a ridiculous thing, right? Placing our averos on the head, that's like, almost like by Tasha, people think that they're feeding their averos to the fish. It was a joke because, by Tasha this year in my shul, so they had a fish, like a little fish bowl with some goldfish on it, and one of the goldfish actually in the middle of Tasha jumped out of the fish bowl and landed on the floor and died. So it was like kind of funny, like, the fish didn't want that many averos. They just wanted to commit suicide. That was better for it than actually, but seriously, that's what people think. People think that they're feeding their averos to the fish. But Lamaisa, by the Seir HaMishtaleach, it seems exactly that's what it is, right? That's exactly what it seems to be, that we're just placing our averos on this goat and we throw it off a cliff like, oh, we're cleansed. How does that work? How does it work? And the Gemara actually in Yuma says something actually even much deeper than that. The Gemara in Yuma says that when the Kohen Gadol goes l'fnai l'fnim into the Kodesh Kodashim and sprinkles the blood of the Seir LaHashem, right, in between the bottom of the Aron, in between, right, the Aron itself, that's when you know, biyadua, that the Seir HaMishtaleach was thrown off the cliff. What about that event of getting the blood sprinkled in between the bottom of the Aron? Give us any sort of inkling that the Seir was actually thrown off the cliff. The reason why we focus so much on the Dorim, both by Rosh Hashanah and by Yom Kippur, is because man in this world is called a Medaber. We're called one who speaks. Every single thing in this world, every single thing in reality is called a Dover, right? A Dover, it's a something. And the way that we actually perceive and express and give, I guess you could say, credence to reality is by us defining it, by us defining our reality. Some of you guys who heard the shiur that I gave last week know that the Sultan is called a Melech Sil V'Zaken. He's called the king. And he's not a king who is foolish, who's old and foolish, but he's the king of the fools. Why? Because the Sultan is the master at distorting reality. He's the master at actually thinking and showing you, right, that the world that he paints in front of you, the reality that he paints in front of you, that you think that that's real. And again, you guys, as the alumni of the yeshiva, know this. When you're in yeshiva, right, it's very easy to say these things. But when you go out into the world and you see the world around us, what everybody's chasing and everything that they're doing, it literally makes you think that what everybody is chasing after, that's reality. That's what's important. That's all the koach of the Satan. That's all the koach of the Satan. To make us fabricate and think and use our koach hadibur, which actually should be used to express what true reality is. To express actually a false reality. Yom Kippur is the day when the Sultan loses his power. The Sultan totally loses his power to confuse us. And we can actually come to the comprehension and the clarity of what real reality is, what the true reality is. But there's only one way that we can do that. We have to disassociate ourselves. We have to disassociate ourselves from the false reality that we thought that was. What the Gemara actually means of us placing our averus onto the Seir HaMishtaleach is that what we're recognizing is that it's not a part of us. Unfortunately, there's a very common theme within modern psychology and modern events that people think that the things that they're challenged by are who they are. The averus that they're involved in, that's who I am. That's what makes me me. And kol zman, as long as we feel that our averus are a part of ourselves, it's who we are, it's our essence, it's everything about us, there's no chance for slicha and kapara. Because we'd have to eradicate ourselves in order to actually be able to gain that. What the Seir HaMishtaleach makes us understand is our averus are separate from who we are. The things that we tripped up on, the things that we messed up on, the things that we fell prey to, granted, we did them, but it's not who we are. We were a mafata. We were seduced by the Yetzer. That's actually why there's a phenomenal measure, crazy measures that talks about how the Yetzer Hara is really, he comes into your house first like a visitor, right? He offers you something, and by the end of his stay, he makes you feel that he's the king. And we all know that experience very well, that very often the first time that we get challenged by something, we feel like it's an outside force that's actually trying to overcome us and drive us and make us. And by the end of it, it's us. It's who we are. The entire avodah of Yom Kippur is to disassociate ourselves from that reality, to disassociate ourselves from thinking that those things are who we are. It's things we did. And by the way, that's exactly how the Ramchal describes all of tshuva. Akiras haratzon is ka'akiras ha'maisa. If I'm not, my ratzon is not there, if it's not what I wanted, it's not what I did, then that ratzon is not who I am. Granted, the maisa got done, but now I can get slicha and kapara because it's not me. And that's why it's only at the moment that the Kohen puts the dam of the seer. Why does he use the dam of the seer? So we know very well that the Medrash tells us that the blood of a seer looks exactly like the blood of a human being. And the dam is our nefesh. What the avodah of Yom Kippur is that we have to take that dam from the seer, and we have to place it in between the bottom of that aron, that place of transcendence, which is the absolute revelation of the true reality in this world, of the malchus of the Rabbanos in this world. That's where we are. That's where the essence of everything that we are is. And those averos that are outside, they're bachutz. They're separate from us. Granted, we have to do tshuva for them. Granted, but once we recognize that they're not who we are, they can get tumbled off a cliff, and we can get a kapara. That's the essence of the avodah of Yom Kippur. That's why Yom Kippur only starts with Hataras Nedarim. A person's words and what we express are how we define reality. And unfortunately, we put way too much credence, way too much importance into a reality which actually is just fabricated. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's shvuah that emanates from Har Sinai is the shvuah that we need to remain in Golus. We need to remain entrenched into that world of the Yetzer Hara. And the reason why that bas kol emanates from Har Sinai is because Har Sinai, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us Matan Torah, is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed us what true reality is. And not only true reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being Melech of the world, but true reality of who we are in our essence. That all those things that we think are us, all those things, those challenges that we are challenged by, that we think are us, are not really us. The kol zman that we're separate from Har Sinai, there's a shvuah. Oili shnishbati umi meferli. Kol zman that we haven't recognized that as being who we really want to be and who we really are. That shvuah emanates from Har Sinai, saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't be made for his neder. And that's why Chazal said to Rabbi Bar Chana, you should have been made for the neder, by showing how you're still connected to that reality. That's the power within every single one of us. The Hataras Nedarim that we come to do on Erev Yom Kippur is to be made for that neder of the Ribbono Shel Olam. That shvuah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was masbiyah, oili shnishbati umi meferli. That Klal Yisrael has to remain in Golus under the servitude, under the dominion of the Satan and his confusion. That's the Hataras Nedarim that we're coming to do. And through being made for our Nedarim, through being made for that reality that we created, we can now come and be made for that reality. That the Ribbono Shel Olam can't be goyelus. That Kadosh Baruch Hu can't take us out. Because we show that we're still connected to that true reality. Even though, unfortunately, we're not zoicha anymore to have the Beis Hamikdash and to be able to put the dam of the seir into the Beis Hamikdash, between the badim. However, as you guys have heard from me many times before, there's a Kodesh Kadoshim that exists in every single one of us. That Kodesh Kadoshim is in our heart. And we have to put the dam of the seir there. We have to come before HaKadosh Baruch Hu and be matir that neder. Be matir the neder, all of that false reality, thinking that everything that we thought was real was recognized that it's a fabricated reality. We can be matir that neder, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzvah be matir the ultimate neder, to remove us from the dominion of the Satan. And therefore we can go into Yom Kippur, Yom Chasunoso, Yom Simchas Liboy, and mitzvah Hashem walk out of Yom Kippur completely in a different reality. You guys should have a Gemara Chasima Tova, a good ben shiur. Because Baruch Hu should be Mali Kol Mish Alis Libecha L'Tova.